Good.
It picks it up real well.
Good. Where are you, Steve?
Hey, I'm just outside Orlando in Florida.
Ah, beautiful. Beautiful.
Warm and rainy today.
Is it?
Yes, very much
Are you in full lockdown there, or
full lockdown?
Really? Yeah, same here.
I think we're live. I think we're live.
Yeah. It's a bonus.
Hey, everybody. I'm assuming we're live now. My name is Steve Spears. I'm with the Stuck in the 80s podcast. We've been doing it for 15 years, and I'm also working with the 80s Cruise. And tonight we're here with John Parr, and we're going to do a Facebook chat and have some fun and listen to some songs. And we're here. Obviously, we can take your questions too. So there's a window there for you to submit your questions. They'll go into a queue, and the moderator will send them to me, and we'll just have some fun. We'll talk about the Cruise. We'll talk about John's long career, his big hits, his work in the soundtracks. John, how are you doing? Where are we talking to you from tonight?
I'm great. Nice to talk to you and everybody out there, Steve. Yeah, I'm in Yorkshire, England.
Now, where is that in relation to London for those of us who don't know England so well?
We're 200 miles north of England, of
Okay.
London. 200 miles north and just a little bit to the right.
Excellent. I have to ask.
On a parallel with Manchester.
I have to ask because I'm sure everyone's curious. How are you? Are you in full quarantine mode there, like we are here in the United States?
Absolute full lockdown. We're only allowed to go out and do vital things, shopping or go to the doctors or whatever. But where I am, it's as tragic as it is outside. I live in the middle of nowhere, so my life is quite beautiful and quiet, and I'm with my family. So that part of it's great. It's just tragic outside for everybody.
I agree. I read an interview with Cyndi Lauper today, who confessed that she's spending a lot of time dusting her apartment with a Swiffer. I'm curious if you have any similar odd habits that you're using to pass the time.
I spoke to Cyndi last week, and she told me she doesn't let her cleaner in, and so she's completely freaked out. Any odd things? We've got dogs here, so they mess the place up pretty much anyway. But I don't know. It's a big place, so it takes a while for the dust to settle.
What kind of dogs do you have?
We got a German Shepherd and a little tiny dog called a Jug. And a Jug is a cross between a pug and a Jack Russell. So it's a Jug.
I've never heard of that. That sounds amazing.
And it's ugly. It's so ugly, it's cute.
So with all this time off, have you had any time to work on any new music?
No. I've been mainly doing a lot of fundraisers and a few radio shows and things, just kind of keeping me, match fit, really. But I have music to do. It's just tough when the house is full. I think I'm missing something.
Excellent. Well, I want to talk about the cruise for a few minutes. You'll be with us for the 2021 voyage of the 80s Cruise.
It's going to be fantastic.
How did you find out about the cruise?
Well, I've read about them before. I know Roger Daltrey did one, I think 2 years ago, and he said it was fantastic. And they seem to be on the up and up. And what a great thing for for the folks and for the acts as well. It's we get a chance to kind of be normal and be around people, and I guess they get to be around people that have made the soundtrack of their lives, a lot of the music.
That's exactly how it is. You should have been there to hear the wild burst of applause on the 2020 cruise a few months ago when they announced that you would be on the 2021 trip. They played a piece of Naughty Naughty and the passengers exploded.
Wow, how fun. It's funny, in England that song's not so well known, but I know in America it kind of broke me. So that's music to my ears.
Oh yeah, no, they're gonna love you for it. It's odd. A lot of British performers will be on the cruise this year, including yourself, the Human League, ABC, Dire Straits' Legacy, The Alarm, and Johnny Hates Jazz. I'm curious, is there a sense of community among UK artists, especially when you find yourself playing music abroad?
Well, it's strange because half those actually mentioned are from maybe 20 miles from me.
Oh, wow.
Human League, ABC. So we kind of bump into each other if we're doing benefits, particularly in Sheffield. They're really good. I mean, Def Leppard from Sheffield as well. So we often do benefits and we kind of meet up then. I've not really bumped into Phil much, but our paths have kind of zigzagged with Giorgio Moroder and Harold Faltermeyer and people like that. But yeah, I mean, the 80s thing is, well, it was kind of I think the 80s was like the new 60s. It was such a anything's possible time. So yeah, a lot of camaraderie.
Have you been on a cruise before?
Never.
Okay.
The nearest thing I've done has been the ferry to Guernsey, which was 6 hours. But no, so and that was that kind of boat, you know. But yeah, everybody keeps saying, even for pleasure, to do it. But no, I've never got round to it.
Okay. As you're going to have a great time. It's 7 days of really being catapulted back into the decade.
Say again, Stevie froze up on me.
You'll have a good time. It's really a time trip back into the 80s.
Oh yeah, I mean, in that part of the world, I mean, going from Miami down there, I've done a few shows kind of in the Caribbean, and I just love it down there.
I know you've done other 80s festivals before. To you, how are the crowds different at those than, say, like a regular tour or a gig?
They're very different in America. I mean, in England, it's wild. I mean, they get dressed up in the 80s gear, and you don't know which is the act and which is the crowd. You know, in America, I found it to be a bit more reverent. Not that it's not in the UK, but England is just a party weekend.
Yeah, I'm reading comments now from people who are watching our chat. Jenny Warren says, "This is your first cruise, John. You're really going to have fun." And Charlene Makira says, "You're going to need to get your sea legs."
Yeah, well, my dad was a sailor. He was a boy seaman. He was in the Royal Navy for 7 years. When I lived out in the Channel Islands, we used to be on a boat a lot then, and I'm not great. I mean, once it gets a bit choppy. So I mean, I guess those big boats will be fine.
The big boats are fine. I haven't been
Yeah.
seasick. I've been on every 80s cruise and I've yet been seasick. So, and I don't take any medicine, so you'll be fine. So I'm curious if a cruise ship is not the oddest venue you've ever performed at, I'm wondering if you would tell us what some of the more unusual gigs you've had over the decades have been.
Ooh, boy. Well, in 2011, 2012, I was over in America doing a tour to raise awareness and money for the returning military. So played a lot of strange places, tiny wards in hospitals, little tiny community centers, and then sometimes great big arenas with just kind of me and the acoustic guitar, and there'd be 12,000 people. And then the next night you would be down to, you know, a few patients and a couple of nurses and doing the same gig. I play anywhere. I mean, I've been doing this since I was 12 years old. I just think I played everywhere and anywhere, man.
That's fantastic. I know we have veterans, military veterans who are watching today, and they asked me to tell you ahead of time that they appreciate all the work that you've done supporting them and with your charitable concerts.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, probably the greatest moments in my life, in my career, was doing those shows for the USO and for USA Cares military families. It's just a course celeb with me. It's just something I'm doing now. I'm working with Help for Heroes over here, and we're just about to make a film about 2 wounded warriors. So yeah, it's something I'm very active in and very passionate about.
Excellent. If you're just tuning in, we are talking to John Parr about the 80s cruise and his long career in music. If you have questions you want to submit to John, go ahead and type them in the chat window, and then they'll go to our moderator who will feed me the questions, and I'll ask them along as we go. John, I wonder if I could take you back. A lot of people are asking this question. I would like to take you back to the beginning. I read that you were born in Worksop, England. Am I pronouncing that right?
Well pronounced. Well pronounced. Yeah, Worksop. Yeah, Wassop, they say in Yorkshire. Yeah, I was born in. It's a little mining town. We were kind of very down at heel, really. I was born in my grandma's house. My mum and dad and me lived there. My mother's brother, his wife and child lived there, and it was two up and two down with my grandma. So that was the beginning of life for the young Parr family.
Yeah.
And then we moved to the other side of town, which was a new build, and that's when I started getting into music a little bit. I was still young, probably 7 or 8, but that's when I started getting into music.
I've read this, and tell me if I'm wrong. I've read that Worksop is located on the edge of Sherwood Forest, and I think a lot of U.S. fans would be surprised to know there actually is a Sherwood Forest. I always thought it was a fictional place where Robin Hood lived.
That's how it's absolutely true. I mean, Worksop is probably 3 miles from the major oak. There's a tree called the major oak, which is big enough probably to get 4 of you in there, Steve. You could get 4 guys like you in there. It's that big. It's hollowed out, and it's an ancient tree that they said used to be Robin Hood's hiding place. When I came to America, nobody'd heard of Worksop, so everybody, I was announced as all the way from Sherwood Forest, England. Yeah, so it's real.
It's real. People are asking. I'm seeing comments on here about the cruise and asking if I go on the cruise. Yeah, I go on the cruise as well. I'm there to host trivia. In fact, that's one of the things I should tell you about. One of the things that when you're on this cruise is, aside from your shows that you do, there are usually other events that you'll be along with, like a Q&A or a meet and greet. And sometimes you participate in the trivia stuff. And sometimes there's sing-alongs that just kind of pop up in the middle of the hallway. So if you've never been, for those who are watching who've never been on an 80s cruise, it's nearly impossible to explain how 24/7 the action is. As I said, if you have questions, go ahead and pop them in there. I'm reading them as you put them in there. And John's talking now about his early days in England. I heard that when you were 12, you formed a band called The Silence.
Yeah, it was a school band, and we were just drums and a couple of guitars. And I was always getting told off at school by the teachers saying, "You're never going to get anywhere, John. You're always looking out the window, dreaming." And I was just thinking about the gigs with my band. And when I was 15, we played the school dance and with The Silence. And the teachers all came to me and said, "Forget everything we ever said to you. That's what you should be doing, John." So,
Do you still remember any of the songs that The Silence sang?
God, boy, oh boy. I mean, we did covers. We used to do the Monkees and, the songs of the day, so whatever was in the charts, this would be mid-60s. Okay. So all those songs from the 60s we'd be doing.
What was one of your favorites to cover from that era?
Oh boy. I think we used to do Last Train to Clarksville. I remember that from the Monkees. That Monkey show was great. Do you remember? It was just so much fun. I mean, we were young kids, we'd watch the Monkees on a Saturday night, and then the truck would pull up and we'd jump in and go do our little show, and we'd think we were the Monkees. It was great.
Do you still remember how to play it?
No, I don't think so. Do I think? Take the last train to Clarksville. I'll meet you at the station. We'll be back there at 6:30, because I've made my reservation. Don't be slow. Oh, no. Oh, no. And I don't think I'll be ever coming home. Now, that cast me back on that for 35 years.
Oh my God! If nothing else happens during our chat, I got to hear you sing "Last Train to Clarksville." That's gonna be.
They did one of my songs. They did years later. They did a song of mine called "Do It Again." Yeah. You
should do it on the cruise. The Monkees were in syndication when the '80s generation was growing up. So we used to come home from every day at school and turn on the TV at 3:00 in the afternoon, and the Monkees would be you know, the reruns would be playing nonstop. So
they were so great.
yeah.
There was such fun. It's just fun, wasn't it? You know.
Yeah. Did you ever get to
And
meet him?
and good music, good pop music.
Yeah. I interviewed Mickey Dolenz once. He was such a nice guy. So
I heard how Mickey got his job.
How did he get it?
Well, when they were auditioning for the Monkees, there were 4 guys, you know, sitting on a desk. They'd been there, seen 100 people, and they had coffee cups all over their desk. And Mickey Dolenz just walked in, picked a cup up, and went, "Checkmate." And he got a job.
Oh man, we'll never top that. So back to the start of your career, I read somewhere that one of the first things you kind of got your break with was writing songs for Meatloaf. How did that come about?
I've been playing live for about 20 years, and the truck blew up along with the band, and didn't know what to do. I was married. My wife said, "Look, I'm going to pay the bills. You write songs." So I started writing songs and sending cassettes off in those days. And a little publishing company in London heard the stuff, signed me up. It was a really bad deal. I got £500. The lawyer was 400, and my train ticket was 50. So I got 50 quid for my publishing deal. But within a year, they'd sent my stuff out, and I'd got Diana Ross interested, I think Rod Stewart and Meatloaf. And out of the 3, Meatloaf was the one that really hooked. And instantly, I was over in America living with him, working on the Bad Attitude album, and it was the beginning of things.
So it was about that time too that Naughty Naughty came to be, right?
Say again, Steve?
It was about that time too that Naughty Naughty became a song for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was working with Meatloaf on Bad Attitude, and my manager was talking to Ahmed Erdogan at Atlantic Records, and we got a deal. And I always remember the great Ahmed Erdogan saying to me, "John, sex sells, write a song about it." And so I wrote Naughty Naughty, and bang, that was the record that opened the doors completely. America welcomed me with open arms, and I'm always eternally grateful for that. They took me in just like one of their own. It was great.
Did you know that kind of like the moment that you wrote it, that it had the right hook? You felt like it had that hit appeal to it?
It was a really strange one because we had all the songs written for the record. We were down in Florida making the record at Criteria in Miami, and Naughty Naughty didn't exist at that point. It was just a riff. So we used to just warm up every day on the riff and then play one of the record tunes. And then in the middle of it, I had that conversation with Ahmed. And so I thought, well, I should put some words to it. And literally it was the last song on the record. But I fought tooth and nail for that to be the lead single. Ahmed wanted it to be a song called Magical, which I'd written with Meatloaf. But I knew Naughty Naughty had the legs to kind of break through, and fortunately it did.
The video for it was a big hit on MTV back in the early days of the network. Did you immediately see the appeal to music videos and MTV? And also, I'd love to hear the story behind the video.
Well, back to Worksop, I dreamed of movies and being in movies from the little kid sitting on the 7th row at the Regal Cinema at Worksop, 7 or 8 years old, looking at those adventure movies and thinking, man, I dream of it. And then got the chance to get into the film industry. And of course, with the videos, I insisted straight away that we made all the videos on movie films. So they were all shot 35 mil on Panavision. So they were very expensive. And we made that video in San Francisco. And I love cars. So I got to I think it was it 67 or 65 Mustang and the Rolls Royce Corniche, and of course the ladies. And in the car it was pretty. It's a pretty fun time, and I always remember the coming around the corner at the beginning of that Naughty Naughty video. If you look at it closely, you'll see the hubcap fly off the Mustang. It's a complete accident. They told me to drive it slow, and I can't do anything slow. So I came around the corner full tilt, and the hubcap flew off, and they caught it on film. So
yeah,
cool.
if you've ever watched Weird Al Yankovic host MTV, he always plays Naughty Naughty, and he always makes a comment right before the hubcap falls off. He always
Does
says,
he?
does he? Exactly. I swear to God.
Wow. How
So
great.
we got a
Wow.
comment here. There's a comment here from Joyce who says, hello from Wakefield, West Yorkshire. We used to follow John with the band Bittersweet all over your South Yorkshire clubland. If you weren't in the club by 7 p.m., you weren't getting in because John had a massive following.
Well, Bittersweet had a massive following. I was the guitar player. But we were, yeah, I mean, it was almost like when my career took off 10 years later, what I experienced in the clubs 10 years before was the same. We literally were like the hottest thing for 100 miles around, and we played every night, and we were just, sold out and queuing down the road. And it was a terrific band. As I say, I was just a guitar player then, but those days in the clubland of England, that's where I cut my teeth and learned my craft. And I think people still talk about those days, and so I'm chuffed that. What was that lady's name?
Joyce
from Wakefield.
Joyce Baroque.
Joyce. Well, yeah, Joyce. I mean, happy days. I mean, I'm still plugging away. I used to practice 4 hours a day for those shows, and I've been 2 hours today practicing. So nothing changes.
Oh, she just sent a bunch of emoticons. She's so happy you said her name. She's probably not so happy I mispronounced it though. You talk about.
I think you froze, Steve.
You talk about the time you spent in the old days preparing and then the success of Naughty Naughty. I'm kind of curious, what was that first big tour like when you were supporting, your first album?
First tour was with Toto, and I went out with Toto. For anybody who's out there got a dream or think life's pretty hopeless, I can tell you 2 years before that, my wife bought me Toto 4, and I remember listening to Africa and all those great songs and crying. I literally cried. I thought, I'm never, ever going to be able to compete with that. And 2 years later, I was on the road with them. They became friends of mine. They even played on my records. So the dreams can come true, and it was a dream. When we played, I think I did 3 months with Toto. I used to travel with Steve Porcaro and Steve Lukather, Jeff Porcaro and Steve Lukather. We were big pals, and that was it was a dream come true. It was the stuff of dreams.
Excellent. If you're just joining us, we're talking with John Parr, who's going to be on the 2021 voyage of the 80s cruise, which is in March. We've talked about some of his early career. Right now we're talking about some of his first hits in the 80s. If you have questions that you want us to make, go ahead and type them in, and we'll try to get to them as we go along here. In fact, somebody asked here, Mike Palmer wants to know whatever happened to the Mustang from the Naughty Naughty video.
All the cars they ever lent me, they always had babysitters or bodyguards, and that was no exception. I've got no idea it was such a hot car. I mean, that was the dream car, wasn't it? And those, ragtop Mustang, of that era. I mean, yeah. God knows what they're worth now, but yeah. All the cars. Strangely, the only car that never had a babysitter, which I couldn't believe, was the Ferrari. I had a Ferrari in Blame It on the Radio, and I did crazy stuff in that, and nobody cared. And it was the most expensive car I'd ever used, probably £1 million now, that car.
So someone's asking, and it was Chris Salmon is asking, and it was going to be my next question anyway. So it was about this time that you probably met David Foster.
Yeah.
And he wanted you to write a song for a movie that some of us might vaguely know called St. Elmo's Fire. I'd love to hear the story behind that meeting with David.
Well, David tells this story, so I can't get sued for it because David told me. He told me that he loved Naughty Naughty, and he was working with Paul McCartney, and let's just say they were using Naughty Naughty as a template for another song they were writing. And David's wife came in from shopping and said, while they were doing this thing, and she said, there's a guy on the radio and he's ripped your song off. And of course, that was me on the radio. And it was like in reverse. It was them copying Naughty Naughty. So that's my claim to fame with David and Paul. But Naughty Naughty opened the door to David, and he told me that story and said, "Look, I'm doing this movie. I'm doing the score for it, and I'm doing 10 original songs. Will you come over and write a song with it for it with me?" And I went over there, and he gave me this song. He said, "Look, man, I'm too tired. Will you sing this?" And it wasn't the greatest song. And I went, "I'm sure we could do better, David." And he went, no, I'm exhausted. Please do this. I went, "Let's just have half an hour." So we went in the booth for half an hour and we wrote a song. And I went, "Wow, this is great." And David said, "No, we can do better." We wrote another one, 10 minutes. He said, "We can do better." And the third one was "St. Elmo's Fire."
Wow.
In about an hour, you know.
I think a lot of people know, some people anyway, know the story about how you found inspiration for the song in the form of the Canadian wheelchair athlete named Rick Hansen. But if you don't mind, for those who don't know the story, I'd love to hear you tell it again.
Well, we'd written the music and all the arrangement really quickly, but I just couldn't get a handle on what the subject was. As you know, I'm from Worksop, a mining town. I left school at 15. So trying to identify with rich kids in, collegiate schools and worried about where their next 100 grand's coming from, it just didn't really register with me. And David said, "Well, look, this has nothing to do with the movie, but maybe it'll inspire you." And he showed me a little video of this guy in a wheelchair, Rick Hansen, just setting out from Vancouver on what was called the Man in Motion tour. And it's just a little local news video. And when that van pulled out of the shopping mall, there were just 4 people waving it off. And it said, "Rick Hansen, Man in Motion World Tour." And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I got to write this song, but I'm going to write it about, what's going to happen. So St. Elmo's Fire was a prediction really of what did happen, because 2 years, 2 months and 2 days after Rick Hansen set out from Vancouver, he wheeled back into Vancouver, million people lining the streets, everybody singing St. Elmo's, and he raised 18 million for spinal research. So the power of music and the inspiration of a man who wouldn't sit down and take no.
The one question I'm seeing over and over again as you're telling your story is, did you get a chance to talk to Rick, and what did he say about the song?
I was talking to Rick last week. We became lifelong friends. The thing that initially inspired me about Rick was when I saw that video in 1985, he talked about, you break your arm, you break your leg, you're in a cast for 6 weeks, but you break your back and you're in a chair for the rest of your life. And I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to get in this chair. And I really got in that chair with him in my head. And so every time I play that song and perform that song, I always tell Rick's story. And every 5 or 10 years, David and I do the Rick Hansen benefit. He's built a foundation now. ICORD is the biggest research facility in the world for spinal research, and the foundation's raised $300 million now for spinal research. The greatest thing Rick ever said to me was he sent me a telegram when he was on the road in Man in Motion, and he never used to wheel with the Walkman playing, with the music playing. He just wheeled so he could hear everything. And he'd had enough one day, and he went in the truck and he said, "That's it, I can't do any more." And he said to me, "Whenever I feel I can't turn another wheel, I play the song and I can go out and do another 20 miles.
Wow.
Well,
got chills.
You can't better it. That's bigger than hit records. That was the greatest accolade of my life.
It obviously became a huge hit, topping the charts here in the US for 2 weeks. How did this song's success change your life?
Well, it opened the door to Hollywood. As I said, I'd had the dream of working in movies, and suddenly I did 10 movies, 10 Hollywood movies in 2 years. Some big ones, did Arnold Schwarzenegger movie and Three Men and a Baby, loads of things. And unfortunately, my record company didn't like me doing it. So I would have a song in one of the biggest movies in the world, but it would never be released as a single because Atlantic wanted me to be a rock and roller. And I just saw myself a bit wider than that, and that's really why my kind of recording career stalled a little bit, but my movie career went great.
Some people call Kenny Loggins, who was on last year's 80s cruise, the king of the 80s soundtracks, but I think you give him a pretty good run for the money on that title. 10 songs on soundtrack.
Yeah, me and Kenny used to be Mr. Soundtrack. That was the two of us. Yeah, stereo.
When you're writing a song for a soundtrack for a movie versus a regular album, how is the process different? Do you get to see the storyline, read the storyline? Do you get to see clips from the movie? I'm just really curious about that.
Yeah, generally I get to see a rough cut of the film. With St. Elmo's Fire, I saw nothing, and that was the blessing. So it enabled me. I just knew the basic outline with St. Elmo. So when I wrote the lyrics, all I need is these pair of wheels for once in his life, a man has his time. They think I'm talking about Demi Moore's Jeep or Emilio Estevez getting the girl, when really I'm talking about turning the wheels of the wheelchair and when Rick breaks through the tape. So that was ambiguous. But generally, like with The Running Man, the Schwarzenegger movie, they took me to the preview theater. I watched the movie and I heard the song play in my head straight away. And I went over to Germany and worked on it with Harold Faltermeyer, but I'd already heard the song in my head. And often, if it's a good movie or it's an inspiring person directing it, straight away I'm fired up, and I wanna be able to take their story and put another horse on the team, you know, and be pulling it even further. That's what I try and do with, and I think that's why I got so many gigs with the soundtracks, because I had a lot of empathy.
As soon as I said Restless Heart, or as soon as you said Restless Heart and Running Man, everyone started lining up, hoping that you'll at least play at least part of it for us. Would you indulge us?
Restless Heart. Let's have a go. This is no game. Standing in the dark, I swear I heard you calling my name. And I knew things had changed. No pain, no gain. Something in your eyes just told me that this nightmare would end. I found a friend. Shouted through the highest steeple, laid it out to all the people. Hey! Play it on the loudest speaker, burning like the highest fever. You hit the right spot. No more lonely nights with a restless heart. Roll the dice, make a brand new start. When the world you knew got shattered, you and me were all that mattered. Ain't no way I'm gonna stop this restless heart running away with you. Human again. I take you in my arms and hold you till the fear is all gone. And now the race is won. Shouted from the highest steeple, laid it out to all the people. Hey! Screaming on the loudest speaker, burning like the highest fever. You hit the right spot. No more lonely nights with a restless heart. Roll the dice, make a brand new start. When the world you knew got shattered, you and me were all that mattered. Ain't no way I'm gonna stop this restless heart running away with you.
Oh man, Oh, I wish you could read all the comments we're getting here. I mean, people are just lighting up. People saying, "I can't wait for 2021. Can't now. I'm looking forward to seeing him more than ever." Someone's asking to play.
First time. That was the first time I ever played that acoustic. Never
Oh,
did
it's
it before.
yeah. I got chills. I don't know. I'm looking around and just
Wow.
like I wish there was a crowd around me. I mean, but we're all watching online, so that's kind of cool. Oh my God. If you're just tuning in, you just missed the greatest 3 minutes of my life. But we're talking to John Parr, who's going to be on the 2021 80s cruise. We've talked about MTV. We've talked about his movie soundtracks. I still have some more questions about movie soundtracks. Again, if you want to submit questions, go ahead and just type them in there at the bottom, and I'm seeing them pop up, and our moderator's taking a look too. And wow, something else. Yeah, there's people love the soundtrack ones. I mean, I know you wrote the theme to 3 Men and a Baby, which appears in the movie, but maybe not on the soundtrack, and was just finally released as a single last year. That's unusual.
You're freezing up a bit, Steve. Actually, I'll come in. I think I know what the question was. Yeah, I'll come in. Huh?
Yeah.
It was
just
another
asking
David
about it.
Foster. Yeah. Sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was David Foster called me up, and strange story. He said to me, "Are you not interested in doing soundtracks anymore?" And I went, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Because Carol Bayer Sager's just rang Atlanta in doing them." This was again the record company not wanting me to do movies, and I went, "Man, I'd love to do it and to work with Carol Bayer Sager, and as it happened, Hamlish as well." So David and I met up. We went down to Nashville, and we wrote "The Minute I Saw You." With Carol had already written the lyrics, and I don't know if many people know that Leonard Nimoy was the director of that movie. So Leonard came down. I mean, I'd grown up watching Star Trek, so it was really bizarre seeing. It's really funny story with Marvin Hamlish. Marvin Hamlish was just big, larger than life guy. Let me ask you something. Let me ask you. I've got a question for you. Let me ask you something. And he would be like this 24/7. And Leonard Nimoy was very, very laid back, and he kept going, Leonard, let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. And he went, "Marvin, I have no more answers for you."
Oh my God. So you have 3 Men and a Baby. You've got St. Elmo's Fire, Restless Heart. American Anthem is probably one of your Two Hearts. It's probably a song it's one of those few movies where the movie soundtrack is probably better than the movie.
That film was directed by Albert Magnoli, who'd just come off of Purple Rain with Prince and done that great job. Alan Silvestri did the score, legendary composer. Albert rang me up and he said, "Look, John, I want you to write this epic, big anthem song, but I don't want any of that. We're going to make it crap in it." And, I'm kind of so positive, and I'm thinking, well, how can you be triumphant? Kids are trying to, this movie's about these two kids falling in love and trying to get a gold medal. So that's why the song goes, "Two hearts beat as one together. It may not be forever, but it's for now." And so that was the thinking. It was my dad's favorite song, and it is one of my better songs. And as you say, probably wasn't the greatest movie, but it was such a challenge trying to come up with something so triumphant. But it was, well, again, it's become very positive, hasn't it, about being in the now, being mindful. But of course, then it wasn't. It was the 80s. It was all about, we got to make it, we want it, and everything's good. But it was Happy Days, and that was another fun video.
Yeah. In fact, I meant to ask you earlier, because there's a video for St. Elmo's Fire where at the very end you are singing to the cast, and I'm just kind of curious. At that point in your, did you know did they know who you were? Did you know who they were? And what did you think of the movie ultimately?
I think for sure they didn't know who I was, and for sure then they didn't want to be there. You look at their faces, and it's like, my script said, John walks down the stairs, and Demi Moore's at the record player looking sad, and John walks over and cheers her up. Well, I mean, I'm lip syncing, so I'm doing all this. I mean, I can think of a few ways to cheer Demi Moore up, but that wouldn't be one of them. We became pals after that. Rob, I spoke to Rob last week. He's been over in England actually doing a TV show about 40 miles from me. We did a telethon last week and we were talking. We've kept in touch just as David and I have, and you know, we played on stage. In fact, Rob and I have done a couple of shows together where we've done duets and stuff. I think Demi did one as well. You can't get them off stage once they do it, though. They're just hugging it.
You've toured with so many iconic acts over the decades. Tina Turner, Hart, Bryan Adams. I'm curious, which of the artists that you've toured with have you formed some of the strongest bonds and friendships with?
I used to bump into Bryan a lot in the early days. You know, we would, you know, New Kids on the Block. He was from Vancouver, and I just see him in airports. You know, he'd have the hoodie up and stuff, no entourage and whatever. So I've done a few shows with Bryan, and we did something in my hometown not so long back. Tina was the big influence on me. Did the Private Dancer tour with Tina. I did 40 shows, and I used to do my show. I'd wait for the lights to go down, and then I'd sneak out and I'd watch Tina. So I saw all 40 shows, and that was like learning at the knee of the master. That is like one of the top 5. I've seen her in all weathers, in all states, to do what she does, and she never fails. She's just the greatest.
Excellent. I'm reading through some of the questions that we're getting from those who are watching us. Somebody wants to know.
I froze you.
It's happened before. I'm reading some of the questions that people are submitting for me to read. Tim Kelly wants to know, how did you come up with the clever lyrics for Love Grammar?
Oh boy. Thank you for that, because that song got me the deal. Love Grammar, I think I wrote it in 82, and my manager jumped on Ahmed Erdogan's desk and went doing all the moves to it, because it's a song, if you know it, sounds like this sweet ballad, and then it suddenly explodes.
Yeah.
I usually write songs with a story or something that's got a lot of truth with it, but I also like to write songs that have got wordplay, and so Love Grammar was wordplay. In English grammar, I before E except after C. I thought in a love affair, I before he except after she knows I'll always be there. So it was a play on words, which I thought was quite clever. Plus, it was that mixture of, you know, that kind of you just thought you were in for a nice ballad, and it just hit you straight between the eyes about 1 minute in.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Thank you.
Barry Cooper calls you a top guy who has followed. He says he's followed you for years. Bittersweet, Ponder's End, and he says he always knew you would make it.
Well, God bless you. What is his name again?
Barry Cooper.
Barry. Yeah. When I was a little boy, you know, I always used to say, when I'm going to make it. And my mum and dad would say, you know, if you ever make it. And I would always correct them and say, no, when I make it. And I played those clubs for 20 years, and but just could not get a record deal. We could stand an audience on there. We could give them shivers, but we couldn't get a record deal. And I think some of my greatest work was in Ponder's End and in Bittersweet. And I don't like the word late. I mean, a lot of people say that with me, legend. I don't kind of believe all that thing. But if there's any, I think if, in the true sense of the word, where people still talk about things, that in some ways, if you like, legendary or at least noteworthy. And I'm almost more famous in England for my work before I made it in the clubs, because we had such a memorable time with everybody, and we were a great band. It was a great time. There was something magical going on, and there were lots of great bands around, so competition was strong. So you had to work. As I said, I used to practice so hard every day just to kind of shine. Being a bit of a show off, I wasn't singing so much then, so I had to show off with the guitar and kind of steal the limelight a bit. But they were great bands, so God bless you for that. Thank you.
I know one of the questions we got in advance was about your famous Les Paul guitar, the
Yeah.
Stars and Stripes. How did you come about acquiring the famous guitar?
1 second.
Oh, we're gonna see it. We're gonna see the guitar. Oh, there it is.
There it is, with a broken string.
Oh.
So I turned professional when I was 19, and it was a residency with the two boys from the Silence, and we went and did a residency in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, and we got £30 a week each, and we did 4 45-minute shows at night and 2 45-minute shows at lunchtime, 6 days a week, and I never drank at all that 6 months. I saved all my money, and I bought this at the end of the season. I think it was 200 guineas from Surrey Sound. And then my dear friend Robin Skillen, he did this front. He did this in 1972. It's kind of fiberglass and glitter, if you can see it close.
Oh yeah.
It's a beautiful
Wow.
thing. And so Robin's work's been with me since, we were school friends. We were little boys when I was 6 years old. So he's been with me on all the road with the Stars and Stripes. As I say, this isn't something I stuck on when I made it in America. I dreamed of America, all my life. And, all those years later, finally they let me in, and Stars and Stripes.
Oh my God, we got to see the guitar. Are you bringing it with you on the cruise? Are you going to bring the guitar with you,
Steve?
Are you going to bring the guitar with you on the cruise? Will we see it on the cruise?
I don't know. I'm nervous of it these days. I never used to be. But the airlines that I have a sister to that's got the Union Jack on it, and they broke it. The airline it's like smashed it. It's fixed, but it's kind of the Stars and Stripes. I mean, it's not intrinsic value. It's kind of love value. So it's I'm frightened of what I'd love to take it everywhere, but I just get frightened of the airlines.
I'm intrigued by this question here that I'm going to ask you, and I have no idea what it means. And I hope it's not a trick.
Okay.
But Charlie Jones wants to know, he says, "Hi, John, can you still do the plectrum trick?"
I can, but not on here. I mean, if I do it here, basically it's like I can't even do it because I can't move. But basically I have to play the guitar and then flick the plectrum up my back and catch it and catch it in my teeth and all this. But you need room to do it. Yeah, I still do it. If you look, I do. That's not a trick in the Naughty Naughty video. That's it. That's the actual thing I do. It's not. It was so fast in the video they had to draw around the pick on every frame, but it's actually the guitar pick flying through the air. And so yeah, I always do it. Kick it in the air and do it.
I have to ask this because I'm super curious. You've worked with the all-time great producer Mutt Lange. What was that like?
In my career, probably top 3 things of all time. As a human being, he's even more of a human being than he is a producer. Just the greatest. As you know, he's very reclusive. We worked together. There's only 2 guys ever co-produced with him. One was Mick Jones and myself. And I was so honored to get that. I learned so much. He's so humble, so talented. For those people who don't know, he's the mastermind behind behind a lot of Bryan Adams stuff, Def Leppard, Shania Twain, Back in Black, AC/DC, Foreigner 4. It's like
Everything, yeah.
Just everything. And so can you imagine going to work every day and sitting not only with a lovely person, but with, I've had them on either shoulder. I've been blessed to have 2 of the greats, David Foster and Mutt Lange. There's not much between those 2 guys that hasn't been done, really.
I'm getting a lot of questions from people who are going to be on the cruise with us, and they're all asking, if I buy you a drink, what is your drink of choice?
Oh boy, I like a glass of red wine. I like a glass of Saint Emilion. I like that. If I'm in the mood, a glass of champagne. I ain't a drinker, but yeah, just if I'm in the mood. But yeah, I like a nice glass of wine. Yeah, so we'll have a glass of wine on that cruise.
Excellent. There's one traditional question I love to ask at every interview. And for those who listen to my podcast, they know what's coming. I call it the podcast time machine question. And
Okay.
basically the premise is this. We like to think of our podcast as a trip back to the 80s each week. But if we actually owned a time machine and I could offer you a seat on the time machine, what event would you go back in time to either re-witness or to, if you wanted to, you could actually change it?
Musically, I think I was quite surprised by this. The greatest thing I ever saw musically was Prince. I saw Purple Rain at the Orange Bowl and I got invited back with him, and it was Apollonia then, but it was the full deal, the full Purple Rain show with the time and everybody, Sheila E., the whole thing. And it was, I looked at that show and everything I imagined to do in a show, he did, in spades. It was just, he was Jimi Hendrix, he was Little Richard, he was James Brown, but he also was Prince. And I did a thing with Jimmy Jam last week. I don't know if you've seen it yet. They'd just done a documentary on Prince. I think it aired on Tuesday in America. And Jimmy Jam said, whatever you've heard about Prince, however good you think he was even better. And I have to agree. A lot of people think he's not that rock and roll, but he really was. He would play lots of little gigs. He'd do like a big stadium, and then he'd go play like a little rock gig and just shine because he didn't need to hide behind anything. It was the real deal. So would be Prince, really, I guess.
You're getting a lot of standing ovations from people who really love your answer, and I'm with Chuck Coverly here, who says I'm writing in that
weekend there, Steve.
A lot of people really loved your answer, and one person Chuck wrote, "I'm riding in that time machine with you, John. Let's go back and see Prince and Purple Rain and tour." That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I would love to end our chat with, and everyone's asking me to ask you to do it, so I will plead. We would love to hear St. Elmo's Fire.
Okay.
If you have the time.
St. Elmo's Fire. Okay. Well, when you're listening to this, again, because it's on the acoustic, imagine the guy in the chair. He's gone across the deserts. He's gone across mountains. This is for Rick Hansen and for everybody out there in cruise land. And I'm dying for this cruise. It's going to be fantastic. We'll have a ball. Let's do St. Elmo's. Growing up, you don't see the writing on the wall. Passing by, moving straight ahead, you knew it all. But maybe sometime, if you feel the pain, find you're all alone. Everything has changed. Play the game. You know you can't quit until it's won. You gotta soldier on. Only you can do what must be done. You know in some way you're a lot like me, just a prisoner, and you're trying to break free. I can see a new horizon underneath the blazing sky. I'll be where the eagles flying higher and higher. Gonna be a man in motion. All I need's these pair of wheels. Take me where my future's lying. Set them on fire. enough. Don't know just how far that I can go. Soon be home, only just a few miles down the road. I can make it, I know I can. You broke the boy in me, but you won't break the man. I can see a new horizon underneath the blazing sky. Happy when the eagles flying higher and higher. Gonna be a man in motion, all I need is these pair of wheels. Take me where my future's lying, set elbows fire. I can climb the highest mountain, cross the wildest sea. I can feel set elbows fire burning in me. Just once in his life, a man has his time. And my time is now. I'm coming alive, coming alive. I can hear the music playing, I can see the banners fly. Feel like a man again, hold my head high. Gonna be a man in motion, all I need is a pair of wheels. Take me where my future's lying, set elbows fire. I can climb the highest mountain, cross the wildest sea. I can feel set elbows fire burning in me. Gonna be a man in motion, all I need is a pair of wheels. Take me where my future's lying, set elbows fire. I can climb the highest mountain, cross the widest sea. I can feel set elbows fire burning in me. Burning, burning in me. I can feel it burning. Ooh, burning inside.
Oh God. Oh, John, thank you so much. This has been incredible.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed it. That's was that an hour? Quiet, flew.
I know. I could go a whole nother hour. We can't wait to see you on the cruise. I can't believe we have to wait another 11 months for it, but we'll be watching you on social media. And for those who are watching this chat, I hope you join us on the cruise. We're going to have a great time. John Parr is going to lead us in song. But that's all we have for tonight. Thanks for everyone for watching, and thanks, John, for staying up late with us here in the United States.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, everybody out there. All aboard. I'll see you then.
Good night, everyone.